We look back at the life and legacy of Prince Philip as the royal family remembers the Duke of Edinburgh.
My family and I miss my father enormously. He was a much-loved and appreciated figure.
Royal author Andrew Morton looks back at Philip and Elizabeth's 7-decade love story.
Princess Elizabeth first met Prince Philip when she was only 13, and she was enamored with him. He barely gave her a second glance.
Plus, royal biographer Ingrid Seward opens up about Prince Harry and Prince William's relationship with their late grandfather.
I mean, there's no way they're going to be anything other than absolutely charming to him, and vice versa, because there's no point. It's not about Harry this day, and Harry knows that it's about his grandfather. And I think, everyone is going to be watching the body language, but I think that we won't see anything that tells us anything apart from the fact that they're going to all put on a very good show.
We've got that plus so much more on today's Royally Us. Hey guys, Christina Garibaldi here with Molly MULSHINE, the host of the Diva Behavior Podcast, and welcome to Royally Us. Molly, what a life we're going to talk about today.
I know, 9 decades of history making and building a legacy. It's really interesting stuff.
It really is. It really is. Well, this week, the royal family, the United Kingdom, and people all over the world are mourning the loss of Prince Philip, who died on April 9th at the age of 99. But before we see how the royal family reacted, what the plans are for the future, we wanted to take a look back at his incredible life. Take a look.
In 1922, after his family was exiled from Greece, Philip moved to France and joined the British Royal Navy at the age of 18. He went on to serve in the Mediterranean and the Pacific during World War II. Philip met his future wife at a wedding in 1934. However, they became acquainted in 1939. He, a young 18-year-old cadet, and she, a 13-year-old heir to the throne.
Without him, she would be slightly lost, I think.
The couple married in 1947 at London's Westminster Abbey. 200 million people from around the world tune into the BBC radio broadcast of their nuptials. In 1948, they had their first child, Prince Charles. They later had 3 more children, Princess Anne, Prince Andrew, and Prince Edward. Shortly before his wife became the Queen in 1952, Philip left the military after achieving the rank of commander and was made the Duke of Edinburgh.
My grandfather was, had a very successful career in the military or in the Navy. He gave it all up to do his job and to be there to support the Queen.
From the early 1960s to the 1980s, Philip was the UK president of the World Wildlife Fund and president of the International Equestrian Federation. Philip had described himself as an expert in dontability, which he explained as the science of opening your mouth and putting your foot in it. Philip was the oldest ever male member of the British royal family and the longest-serving consort of a reigning British monarch. Philip and Elizabeth were married for 73 years. They had 8 grandchildren, including Prince William and Prince Harry, and 10 great-grandchildren.
I mean, just the accomplishments that he has had over these 9 decades is just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that he served in the war, and that wasn't even like the beginning of how interesting and insane his life was going to be.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, let's get to our royal roundup and kick it off with how the royal family has been reacting to this sad news. Following his death, the palace released a statement saying it is with deep sorrow that Her Majesty the Queen announces the death of her beloved husband, His Royal Highness, the Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. I mean, what was the initial reaction in the UK when news broke? Because I know here it was about 7 o'clock in the morning and, everything, breaking news all over the TV. And there, obviously it's a lot of sadness.
Yeah, that's what it was like here. I think the main thing was people were just so upset to see any family losing its grandfather. Mm-hmm. And this is at the end of a year when that's been the case for a lot of people, even more people than usual. So people could kind of relate to that in that way. And of course, we had the wall-to-wall TV coverage over here. Mm-hmm. All of the billboards that are digital in London sort of went black and had his name and his portrait on them. So it was definitely something to think about. It was like a reflective time for the UK, I would say.
Yeah, and obviously because of COVID, things have changed. They encourage people not to lay flowers and spend too much time outside of Buckingham Palace, but they did do the tradition of putting the statement out on the easel, but they didn't leave it up for very long, right?
Right. Yeah. They don't want crowds to gather. So everything has been sort of modified, and they've actually asked people to donate to charities instead of leaving flowers, which I found kind of surprising because they never usually ask people to donate. So that was interesting.
Yeah, it is sad. I mean, we know we've talked about it on the show over the past several months. His health has been failing. He was in and out of the hospital. He just underwent heart surgery. So, I don't think it was unexpected, but still a great shock, as, we're going to hear from Prince Edward, who spoke out about that as well, coming up in a little bit. But we wanted to say that that Prince Philip will be laid to rest on April 17th, and it will be a ceremonial funeral, but the ceremonial elements will be scaled back because of no public processions, and the royal household will have to adhere to all the COVID guidelines. And that means only 30 people will be in attendance. So definitely a lot different than what you would have imagined.
Right. So it seems that all of the prince's children will be there with their partners. It seems that the grandchildren will also be there with their partners, with the exception of Meghan, obviously, who has gotten medical advice not to travel. Mm-hmm. The great-grandchildren will not be in attendance, according to the reports that we've seen. And the Prime Minister of the UK has decided not to go so that he can open up a spot for another family member. So they're really adhering to these protocols. And, I think it's, knowing what we know about Prince Philip's personality, this is probably the way he would have wanted it, not a big fuss. Right. So I guess it kind of works out. But yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting, especially for the royal family, who's so used to these big public processions.
Right, definitely. Yes, we'll definitely look a little bit different, but I'm sure he will be greatly remembered by everybody, and it will be televised, so a lot of people can tune in and pay their respects that way. But following his death, Prince Charles spoke out, making an emotional statement about his father. Take a look.
My dear Papa was a very special person who, I think above all else, would have been amazed by the reaction and the touching things that have been said about him. And from that point of view, we are, my family, deeply grateful for all that. It will sustain us in this particular loss and at this particularly sad time.
I mean, I feel like this is the most candid we've seen Charles speak about his father ever.
Right. There was a period in the early 90s when he had his biography coming out by Jonathan Dimbleby, when he was talking candidly about their relationship, sort of saying that they were never seeing eye to eye, mm-hmm. and that they had sort of a strained relationship. And it was very surprising to people at the time, I think, that he spoke out about that. But now from this statement, you can see that they've really grown a lot closer, I think.
No, definitely. Calling him his dear Papa, it definitely, it seems like they've made a lot of strides in their relationship over the past several years. And, it's just, obviously it's so sad. And Prince Philip's other children, Prince Andrew and Prince Edward, also spoke out saying how much they will miss their father and how Queen Elizabeth is doing amazing following the death of her husband. So take a look at that.
It's been a bit of a shock. However much one tries to prepare oneself for something like this, it's still a dreadful shock, and we're still trying to come to terms with that. And it's very, very sad. But I have to say that the extraordinary tributes and the memories that everybody has had and been willing to share has been so fantastic.
I mean, I think it was surprising that Prince Andrew spoke out.
Yeah, I'd say. I mean, it seems also a little bit strange to just kind of sneak in at a moment when no one's really allowed to say anything about his recent scandals. Mm-hmm. I was really shocked by that. And also, I don't know if him opening the floodgates of speaking to reporters is like the best idea for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very surprising.
Probably wasn't best timing. Probably wasn't the right move, but that's besides the point. It's all about Prince Philip now, and Prince Edward said some really nice things about it too. And he said, obviously it is a shock, even though it was expected. And they shared some really nice stories about him and how so many people have given so much love in the wake of his death. And, it's not really that surprising that I guess the Queen is doing as best as she can be, because, she's kind of held this family together for so long.
Yeah, and unfortunately, she has been through a lot of loss, starting with her father when she was only in her early 20s, and then her mother and her sister, who were really her best friends, kind of passed away in rapid succession a few years ago. And now it's like, you know, you just can't imagine what that would feel like.
No, definitely. Well, we're going to take a deeper dive into she and Philip's love story with Andrew a little bit later on. But before we get to all that, we wanted to say that Prince William and Prince Harry also released statements of their own, reflecting on what an amazing grandfather and great-grandfather Prince Philip was. Harry said he will be remembered as the longest reigning consort to the monarch, a decorated serviceman, a prince, and a duke. But to me, like many of you who have lost a loved one or grandparent over the pain of this past year, he was my grandpa, master of the barbecue, legend of banter, and cheeky right till the end. And now William, in his own statement, said, my grandfather was an extraordinary man and part of an extraordinary generation. Catherine and I will continue to do what he would have wanted and will support the Queen in the years ahead. I will miss my grandpa, but I know he would want us to get on with the job. I love that they like shared some like private memories as well and showed that, you know, the prince was just a fun guy.
Yeah, it seems like he would have been a really fun grandpa. And I love how their statements each sort of reflected their own personalities.
Mm-hmm.
Like Harry's is sort of talking about the banter and William's is talking about the duty and moving ahead. And I found it interesting in William's statement that he talked about supporting the Queen in the years ahead rather than the monarchy as a whole. That was just really interesting to me because, you know, I guess he just is wanting to say that there's not going to be that many changes. Like, right. Don't worry, we're keeping steady. So
yeah. Definitely. Well, now it is time to spill the royal tea, and William and Harry will both be at the funeral, and it will be the first time the two have seen each other in over a year. It'll be the first time Harry has seen any members of the royal family in over a year. So how will they be towards each other, and what was their relationship like with their grandfather? Well, royal biographer and author of Prince Philip Revealed, Ingrid Seward, reveals all. Take a look. Both William and Harry released pretty touching tributes to their grandfather. How would you describe their relationship with Prince Philip?
I think they both had a very good relationship with Prince Philip. I mean, they would joke together. They would, you know, they'd go to rugby matches together. They would, you know, although Harry and William didn't, you know, follow the same sports particularly as Philip. I mean, Philip was very, very keen on carriage driving, but they did play polo. And I think that they just, you know, they thought he was great. They thought he was pretty cool, actually. I know that William called him a legend. And I think Harry said that, you know, Grandpa's really, you know, looks really cool with his shades on and everything. So I think that they were very fond of him.
So this is going to be the first time Harry has seen his family in over a year at the funeral. Do you think this is going to help them put their differences behind them?
I think for the period that Harry is here, they will very much put their differences behind them. I think that Harry will want to get back to Meghan as soon as as soon as the funeral is over, and he'll probably return to California, you know, maybe the next day or maybe later on Saturday. So he won't have a great deal of time to be in a potentially embarrassing situation with his family. I mean, there's no way they're going to be anything other than absolutely charming to him, and vice versa, because there's no point. It's not about Harry this day, and Harry knows that it's about his grandfather. And I think, everyone is going to be watching the body language, but I think that we won't see anything that tells us anything apart from the fact that they're going to all put on a very good show.
Yeah. Did Philip and Harry's relationship change at all when he decided to leave the royal family?
Yes, I think that Philip was incredibly disappointed and saddened and angry. I think all three of those things. He never thought it would happen. He had, you know, he just never thought Harry would ever do anything like that. He saw Harry as very much being able to take his mantle of military patronages and colonel-in-chief of lots of things, and I think he thought Harry would be a great support to Prince Charles, to the Queen, and to his own brother. So he was visibly very, very upset when Harry decided, you know, to get out.
How was Prince Philip there for Harry and William when their mother passed away?
Prince Philip was very much there for them. The boys were at Balmoral at the time, and Prince Philip took them out on the hill to go shooting or walking or whatever would distract them. Certainly keep them well away from the television and all the goings on in the house. And he's just the sort of man, and he was just so practical. He would, you know, he was very good, and he's also very good with young people. A lot of his charities are connected to young people. He's very good with young people, and he kind of looked after them, made them, you know, made them laugh, and you know, gave them confidence. So much so that well, William didn't want to walk behind his mother's gun carriage, but Prince Philip said to him, you know, William, I think it's something you might live to regret. And if you don't want to walk on your own, I'll walk with you. And he did. And if you see that bit of footage, you'll see when they went go under the archway, under Admiralty Arch, Prince Philip puts his arm around William. So I think he was very supportive during that period.
I mean, everybody is going to be watching this.
I know. And it's just going to be on the front page of every paper in the UK, probably in the US too.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure the only thing we can hope is that it's not a replay of Commonwealth Day last year when William and Catherine sort of snubbed Harry and Meghan, because that is an image that I think is going to live on in everyone's minds.
Totally.
So.
I feel like they will put their differences aside for this, and, you know, they're going to be walking together, and, you know, like you said, so many people are going to be analyzing what they're going to be saying to each other, their looks that they're going to give each other. But on the grand scheme of things, they have to remember that this is all about Prince Philip. And I think that they will put their differences aside.
Yeah.
We'll see. All right. Well, in our royal history moment of the week, royal journalist and author of Elizabeth and Margaret, The Intimate World of the Windsor Sisters, Andrew Morton, he opened up to us about Prince Philip's legacy and his 7-decade love story with Queen Elizabeth.
Well, I think that the Queen will have anticipated this, because she will have known the medical prognosis. I think the positive thing to have come out of it is that the Queen and Prince Philip have spent more time together in the last year because of COVID. They've both been forced to stay at Windsor Castle than they have during them since they were living in Malta when they were just married in 1949-50. So, you know, Prince Philip has been ailing for some time. We've all known that. And if you're living with somebody, as the Queen was, you'll pick up on those nuances far more clearly than we will. So I don't think it will have come as an unexpected blow.
I know you talk a little bit about in the book about Philip and Elizabeth's love story. I mean, how would you describe their relationship over, you know, 7+ decades?
Well, they're like two, you know, giant boulders, really, you know, or oak trees or something like that. That they've grown together, and it's interesting that when Princess Elizabeth first met Prince Philip, when she was only 13, and you know she was enamored with him, he barely gave her a second glance, because she was 13, but she was wearing the same clothes as her sister Margaret, and the Queen Mother, or the Queen as she was then, had a tendency to dress them alike, and that made Elizabeth look a lot younger. Anyway, after spending a few minutes jumping over a tennis court net, Prince Philip got bored of that, so he waded his way through a couple of plates of shrimps, and for Margaret, that was just so heroic. Anybody who could eat that many shrimps was you had to idealize. As for Princess Elizabeth, she saw this kind of blonde Viking character and was rather enraptured. And it's interesting that during the war, that they didn't see an awful lot of one another, but they did keep in touch by letter. And it was clear that there was a very strong romance there from almost the get-go. And both daughters of George VI, Elizabeth and Margaret, fell in love at a very early age. Elizabeth, age 13, Margaret, when she was 16, in South Africa in 1947, when she went out riding with Group Captain Peter Townsend, who was then a married man.
So she thought that Philip must be either stupid or brave to marry Elizabeth. Could you explain that?
Well, I think she thought that Philip was very brave. And when you look back at what he had to go through, you know, compared to some of the newer arrivals into the royal family, he had a really tough time. The Queen and the King, George VI, they were not overly enthusiastic. They talked about we four, the quartet, and George VI didn't really want to break them up. The courtiers were very sceptical of Philip. They thought he was far too much of a brash, arrogant young man, didn't think he'd be faithful to Elizabeth. And then you've got the aristocracy who were opposed. They thought that, you know, he was a low, although he was royal, he was from not a particularly well-known royal family, even though he was an ancestor of Queen Victoria. So there was a degree of snobbery there as well, because he hadn't served in the Guards, he hadn't been to Eton or Harrow, he'd been to a college in the north of Scotland called Gordonstoun. He'd lived a fairly rackety life. His father had gone to the south of France and lived with his mistress. His mother had been put into an institution. So he'd lived a very precarious life for a long time. But he just, as he would always say, he just got on with it. He didn't reflect and think what a rough life he's had. And he really had to work hard to win over people inside the court so that they would look favourably on him. So, you know, Margaret's assessment that he was brave is pretty well spot on.
I mean, what a love story. A lot of people cannot be married for 73 years.
I know, it's really impressive.
It really is. All right, well, before we wrap up, we have to check in on our royal kids. And William, in his statement, opened up about the moments that Prince George, Prince Louis, and Princess Charlotte spent with their great-grandfather. And this was so cute. They shared such a beautiful picture of Prince George and Prince Philip together on his carriage, which I thought was so great.
I had no idea he was such a fan of driving a carriage around.
Oh, neither did I.
What a fun thing for your grandfather to do.
Seriously, I'm just going to pick you up in my carriage.
Yeah, it was such a sweet photo. And, you know, William said in the statement that went along with it that he will never take for granted the special memories his children will have of their great-grandpa. So that was really nice. And it's great, of course, the Duchess of Cambridge took the photo. So I'm sure there are many more photos where that came from, and they'll all remember it forever.
I mean, amazing. 10 great-grandchildren. I mean, a lot of people don't live to see any of their great-grandchildren, but to have 10, that's pretty phenomenal.
10, wow.
Yeah.
That's a third of the funeral guests.
I know, right?
No wonder they can't have them.
I know. Well, what a life, what a legacy. That is it for this week's episode of Royal AS. Please comment below. Let us know your favorite memory of Prince Philip, and check back on Us Weekly's YouTube channel every Wednesday at 10:30. Like I said, keep commenting, keep subscribing. Molly, thank you as always.
Thank you, Christina.
All right, we'll see you guys next week.